Okay. So this is a report someone built. Maybe a second here. It's actually looking at Winter Olympics data over time for each country, and it kind of gives you a view of the different medals and types of medals that people have won over time. So it's just a nice visual representation of data. And this was like a template report that someone built. And again, this is like a live report. This isn't like an image or screenshots. This is actually a real report someone built with real data behind it. I'll try some other ones. I think this hotspot's working well here. Yeah. So this is more like a story around data. You know, again, like interactive. Someone talked about some economic data. They want to put some context around it and provide that kind of story. And this is in Data Studio. I'm actually not even sure how. I would have had a hard time doing this myself, and this person is very creative. Did a good job. And then lastly, we have this another example, which is more around like as a team, how would you build some dashboard that's like important to your specific view of maybe a project that you're working on. This is actually bringing in data from all many different cloud services. And I think this is like, there's no recent data, nobody's spending money recently, it looks like. But we can actually switch this because it's an interactive report. So maybe look at like the last, let's say 30 days. And you can see, you know, for App Engine billing, what was our spend, how did it look? So this is a custom view of data, basically, that you provided, but it's, you know, pulling it all in from cloud services, right? And you can filter that, make changes to get the kind of view you want, right? So from like a internal team perspective, this might be something you could build out yourself, for example. Okay, so we've seen kind of like at a high level what the reports look like. We talked about connecting, visualizing. On the sharing side, we also have a really simple model for sharing, which is just using Google Drive. Everybody's familiar with that. So it's very easy to share reports with like an individual, a group, or maybe you want to share it with the world. And so we allow you to do that. And really what you're doing at that point is you're actually sharing access to the underlying data effectively, because every time someone opens that report, it's the latest data, it's live. Right? It's not a snapshot, it's actually always pulling in the latest data. So you can create the report once, and you can keep revisiting it and getting that updated view of that data, right? And you can share it. Like with groups, I said, you can organize it any way you want. It uses the Drive model. And you can also embed it on your website. So you can take a report, embed that. So actually I have an example of that. So this is on the cloud blog. There was a new data source that we made available a few months ago when the Bitcoin craze was going on. And this is actually pulling in a whole bunch of Bitcoin data around like transactions per day, and things like this. So this is actually live data. I think when we first did this, one of the DevRel people thought it was a screenshot, but it's actually just live interactive data. And you can switch to different pages and that. So, you know, you can again share the report with the world through a blog or whatever you want to do, right? We really want to make sure it was simple to do that kind of sharing. All right, so it's easy to talk about. We've seen some examples. Let's actually like go through and build something here. I can show you a little bit about So what I'm going to do is, so I manage the developer relations team for Google Analytics and for Data Studio, and we have a lot of different resources for developers. So I'm actually going to create a page, a dashboard that's kind of for our team, like what we want to see in terms of metrics that we think are important for our team. So you start with data sources in Data Studio. That's how I'm going to do it. You can come in here and you can go to create a new data source, and you can see all the different connectors that are in here. And we have this demos and tools site, and it has analytics on it. So I actually want to pull in some analytics data on my analytics demos and tools site that we have. So I'm going to go to the Google Analytics connector, select that. I have a whole bunch of different stuff here. And at this point, what I'm doing is I'm configuring this connector to tell Data Studio like what data do I want to have access to. So there's this bunch of stuff in here. So there's this demos and tools site, and I'm going to use this one. And so I've selected the view I want to bring data in for. I'm going to connect. And then this screen, what it's done is it's gone and asked the connector, like, what are all the fields that are available for this data source, for this connector? And for analytics, there's just a lot of different fields. But I'm happy with this, right? And it's, you can actually do some additional calculations in here. You can create new fields. You can set the semantic type differently and stuff like that. But I'm just going to create a report with this data source. And as you can see, as you add the data on here, we have this canvas view that you can actually come in and start building the report. And so I'm going to try to be like somewhat creative here, I guess. I'm going to just put like a little header up here with this rectangle. I'm going to add some text here, call it my team metrics dashboard. I change the color on this. So now I'm going to drag the time series. I want a time series. This is for Google Analytics data. And now it's going to go fetch the data. And it has some default dimensions and metrics it's chosen for me. So in this case, we're looking at number of sessions over time for Google Analytics data for this website. And so what's cool is I can copy this. I can create another chart here. And this time I actually want to use a different data source. So I'm going to come in here and create a new data source. And I'm going to use, we have a GitHub repo that actually open source this website. We open source it. So I can actually connect to GitHub, select this connector. And for each connector, it's a different configuration. It just needs different data. Right? So in this case, I know that the organization is Google Analytics. And the repository in this case is ga-dev-tools. Okay. I'm not going to use a template. And when I connect to here now this is actually fetching data from GitHub API. So it's pulling in data for, in this case, stars, how many stars we got for this repo, and when it was started. It's just two fields, but it's got some data that I'm interested in. And so I can add this to the report now. And the configuration is different between the two charts, so I have to pick what dimensions and metrics I want. So I'll make this the start at for this one. And for the metric, I'm going to use the really only one that's available, which is stars. And so this is pulling in data for, I think since the beginning of time for this repo, how many stars I've got over this period of time, right? But we can go further. Let's go another one. I'm really interested in our NPM package that we have. I'm going to create another data source. NPM downloads. Google APIs. Connect. We have a few fields that are available for this connector. Add to the report. Configure the chart. Complete. And we're going to do downloads. And I can see the downloads we have for my NPM package in this view now. I'm going to copy this. I'll do another one up here. And I think in this case we'll make this a table. So we can do a viz switch to the table. And I actually want to know, we have a Stack Overflow tag that we monitor. So I want to see what questions are being asked there. I can go use that connector. I'm sure you guys are like, how many connectors is it going to do? One more after this. So in this case, the tag is Google-Analytics. Right? That's what we're interested in. And it's pretty simple. Let's connect to this. I mean, the point here is that really you can see in a very short period of time, you're starting to build out a dashboard that can actually be used with your team, right? So I'm going to do, the dimension is, I want to know what the title of the question was, and I also want to know what the view count was. So what are the most viewed questions that I'm getting on Stack Overflow? And then you can style this, go back. Styling is very simple. You come over here, I don't want that. Now we can drag this out a little bit. You can see it's very intuitive here. We got another one. And the last one I'm going to do, just to make everything look kind of somewhat consistent, is I'm going to create another one for Twitter. People like to know what's going on Twitter. So, create a new one. There's actually quite a few different connectors for Twitter. So I'm going to do this one here. And actually we'll do DevFest. Let's do this. DC. Right, so I'm searching for DevFestDC. The Twitter connector has a couple more fields in it, I think, but we're going to see those in a second. You can actually get like retweet counts, tweet text, things like that. And so I'm going to add this to the report. In this case, I want to know, let's see, the dimension I'll do tweet text, and I think I want to know what are the most retweeted, right? This is for DevFestDC. Okay. So I have a dashboard here. I can view this, screen and data here. What's also cool is that I can actually drop a date range on this. Do this, okay. And I'll, oops, right there. Let me style it a little bit differently. White, 24, 30 days. Okay. And so now I have this dashboard I can share with anybody. I can share it with the individual user. I can share it with the team. And when you select the date range, you're actually going to get, it's going to actually update all the charts. All the data for that particular date range that we selected, right? And so you have an interactive report in about maybe like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, not sure exactly, but got a whole bunch of different data there, the view that I want for my team. It's very simple, right? So it's kind of like just, it shows you some of the high level what you can actually do with the product. My styling, as you know, is not very good, but it gets you, you can get there pretty quickly. So in retweet count, we can sort that. I'm curious what the most tweeted text is at DevFest. This would be the table that might give you that there. On Friday, Jared Alexander will be somewhere. So it's like, okay.
Here.
He's gonna be here. Cool. So I didn't want to spend a ton of time on like how it works. I think people get it when they see it, and like this makes sense, I can use it, right? But I did want to go into a little bit more about how we extend the platform and how we build a connector, how that actually works, right? Do you have a question? Sorry.
How robust is this on mobile, this building tool?
To build the reports?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for this kind of analysis, I think you'd want to probably be doing this on desktop mostly. It works, you can definitely build on mobile. But at this point, the main use case that we see typically is people are doing it on desktop, right?
And maybe it's like if I put a slider and I want to move data or something, can I record that so I can replay data changing over time?
We don't have that yet. We have, but it's something that people have definitely requested.
Okay.
Cool. So what Communicators allow you to do is build your own connector, right? So we have that huge list of connectors, but sometimes people have some other specific data they want to connect to. We try to make this fairly easy to follow. We follow the kind of app scripts model. The development effort's pretty relatively low to do this. And we also want to make sure you can share and publish the work that you've done. So we'll go through that and see what that means. The main reason people build connectors, from what I can see, and we had our ideas of why people want to build connectors, but what the main ones are typically, there's a good use case for if you are a company that's building a product that generates data. Typically you want to share that with your customers in some way, or customers are asking for some way to see the data. And as a company, if your core value is not about building dashboards and reports, but it's about that underlying core business, you don't want to spend a ton of time building a whole dashboarding platform for your customers. So typically you see like a lightweight reporting, a page or some functionality for your customers, and then they want to rely on some another tool to do most of the analysis and heavy data kind of visualization. So the idea of them being able to build their own connector is one huge use case that we've seen a lot of. The other one is just if you have proprietary data that you can't really get in the system without building an API and connecting to it, and then that's another one. And then of course there's the just the hobbyist data democratization type of situation where people just like to build connectors and show off what they can do. It's kind of an interesting use case. Okay, so like I said before, if you've already done a lot of work with app scripts or like sheets, you're probably like already 75% of the way there. Mainly because a lot of the work is just URL fetch and some processing of like how you make the data available for data students. That makes sense. So if you've done this already, you're really in good shape. And the reason is because the framework for Data Studio is you have, for the community connectors, is that you have Data Studio, you have a data source on the other side, and you have this connector in the middle, right? And so all of the work in this connector is really about making that translation happen between Data Studio and the format that it expects things in, and the data source that's on the other side of that, which is the API or whatever you're connecting to. Right? And so there's not a ton of complexity to that. You can make it much more robust, but at a very basic level, you can get something working probably within 20 to 30 minutes, if you know an API very well. Typically when I build a connector, I'm spending most of my time on the data source to understand how the API works, right? And how that, you read the documentation and go through that. If you think about all those different, you saw me do build a connector like 6 times there, so you probably got a good idea what that flow looked like. But if you consider how that went, right, we started with the configuration of the connector, right? So when you build your community connector, there's 3 things you really need to provide as part of your connector, which is the get config, right? And that is the thing that will render the configuration for the connector. So when I put in the search term DevFestDC for Twitter, that was the connector configuration there, right? And so your function that you define will tell us what to render for the user to collect the configuration. The next thing, when you click connect, we saw that screen where it was the fields, right? All the different fields you can use for that data source or that connector. And that one is defined by what the connector returns back in this get schema call. Right? And it tells Data Studio, these are all the fields that are available for this particular configuration of the connector. And then lastly, when we're in the report canvas view and we were I was adding charts and stuff like that, then it's making requests to the connector to get the data. And so your connector needs to be able to respond back with the data that is requested by the user, what they drop, drag and drop of the metrics and dimensions, and also what they configured for the connector, right? So those are the 3 core functions that, to define those 3, that's like 90% of the work. Of course, the code that goes in between there is really important. So let's build a user connector right here. We'll try. The build is generous because I think I've already done a lot of work, so it's more of a diff, because I want to show you guys how the changes and how it works. So I've already got the shell of something working, but again, you'll see it's not very complex anyways. Get out of here. So I'm going to use the Open Weather Map API. It is an API that gives you like weather forecast data, and I'm going to use this one, the 16-day daily forecast. So you can get weather data by zip code in this case. So you provide a zip code at this API endpoint, and it gives you back this JSON object, and you can kind of parse it and do something with it. So we're going to do something with it in connectors. So let's go back here. So I have this already kind of set up a little bit. So we're going to go through it. Can you guys see this, or should I plus it up a few times? I can't see. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, there's this getConfig, right? So we have this first function I've defined here, getConfig. And all it does in this case is it returns back this object, this array of objects. And that tells Data Studio how to render the configuration for this connector, what's required. In this case, all I have is an info, which is some instructions for the user, and I have this a text input box, is what I'm asking for here, right? So this is all defined by a spec that we have, a reference doc. And with these two values, then we can get the zip code and we can make a request, right? So that's the getConfig. See how that manifests itself in a second. The second thing is the fields, or the schema that's available for this particular connector. And in this case, what we've done here is there's only like 5 fields, or 4 fields, sorry. We have a city, a time, the max temp, and the min temp, right? So this is just another object here that we define. It's a fixed schema, like nothing's changing. If the user puts in any zip code, it's always the same schema they get back. So the same fields, right? So we haven't done anything. We can just have it statically sitting here. And then here's the getSchema call, which we define, and it just returns that object basically. That's all it does. And there's a whole bunch of like, what are the semantics and stuff like that. I mean, those are what you need to know is just that basically you define this thing in some way. There's a spec for this, but it's fairly straightforward. And then lastly, the get data, which has a lot more going on, but it's really not very complicated when you look at it. We have a get data. Again, this is the query coming in. It's asking for certain fields, and it's asking for, based on this configuration, we need some data. And so we need to know what the zip code is, so we get that as part of the get data call. It gives us the configuration that the user provided. And so we pull up the zip code, and then we have the fetch URL that we're going to do, which is we're fetching data from the API, and we have an API key, which I set up somewhere else. And then we just provide the zip code, and then this, when you do a URL fetch here in this line, it's going to return back the JSON object at that point. And the rest of this is just parsing that effectively to give back the data response to Data Studio. And so really what the important part here then is you're doing some parsing, and this case statement just is written this way to make it a little bit easier to see what's going on, but effectively, for every field they're asking for, just push that data onto this array object, and we'll give it back to Data Studio in array format. And we return that back. So what's cool about AppScripts is that they recently kind of launched this, these newer type of add-ons, and you can create a manifest for your project. And all the manifest does, it kind of defines, for this project, what is this thing, right? And there's a few types of different add-ons that exist that work through this process. One of them is Data Studio. So there's like Gmail add-ons, there's Data Studio add-ons, and there's Sheets and stuff like that. And in this case, because what we've done here is we define the manifest for this project as a Data Studio object, basically. It's a Data Studio add-on. And this tells AppScripts, okay, this project here is a Data Studio add-on. And the point of this, and the reason it's important, is that we've defined our functions, we've created our manifest, we've defined it as a Data Studio add-on, so we can just simply go to publish, and you go to deploy from manifest. And what AppScripts provides you is this nice link that goes right into the product, into Data Studio. So I've defined the functions, and if I click this link, it's going to bring us right into Data Studio with this connector that we're building right now, this weather connector. And so this is actually like coming from that code I wrote there. Here's we said we wanted an info, we got the info here. We wanted a zip code, and we have the zip code here as a text input box. The stuff you see up here is just from the manifest. It just defines some metadata about the connector. Right? So what's cool is now, this is actually zip code for this area. Okay? So I just use the default. We'll connect, right? So that was getConfig. When we connect, the Data Studio is asking for the get schema. It's asking what is the fields for this particular connector. And since we defined it and returned it, we get back our fields that are available for this connector. So we have the 4 fields. Now we can create a report. So when we create the report, what's going to happen, it's going to add the data source like you saw before, and then we're going to be able to build a report with this. And we'll just do a time series. And so when I drag this on the screen here, now data series is making the get data call to the connector. And all that parsing logic is basically going and fetching the data from OpenWeatherMap API, is bringing it back, doing some parsing, and returning back the object. And we have our temperature here from OpenWeatherMap API. So we effectively provided this service to Data Studio users at this point. We can kind of use this and it's working great. Now, there's a couple things we want to do now. Let's do the diff. What are we going to change in this? And you'll see it actually working then. One is, if you notice, the max temp is 300 something, right? So like, what does that mean? Well, if you look at the docs, the default units that they provide is in kelvins, right? Not typically like used extensively from normal people, I guess. But if you're a scientist, that's kind of what you're using, I guess. So I think we want to change this, right? We want to change that. So if we go to units, units format, there is a query parameter called units, and there's 3 values you can set: metric, imperial, or Kelvin. And by default, it's Kelvin, right? So one thing we're going to do is we're going to add an ability for users to change the units. So we'll do that. And then the second thing we'll do is, I know that there's also rain data available in this API, so let's try to get rain data available for our users. So let's go back here. And as usual, because we want to save some time, I have some code down here. But what we want to do is, first we want to get we want to make a single select dropdown for our units to provide that to an option, right? So I already have it all down here. Let's just do this. Save time. And I'll explain it in a second. So here's my get config. I already have those 2 fields. I've added a 3rd field now, which is a select signal. The name is units, and we have 3 options: metric, imperial, and Kelvin. That's all we defined, right? And so now users won't be able to select that. We'll see how it works in a second. The other thing is, we need to make sure when we make the data request to the OpenWeatherMap API that we include this information now, right? We just added units. We need to include that when we make the request. So let's go down to the data, right? So we need to get the units. When the get data request comes in, we need to get the units that they selected out of the configuration, right? So we can do that by, I'll just copy and paste again. Let's do that up here. So we're going to add this new line up here, which is just, so units. So basically we're just saying, what was the configuration? Get units out of it, whatever they selected. And if not, just use whatever default units we wanted, just in case for some reason it wasn't set somehow. That's just pulling out what they configured. And then this line, this is the actual call we're making to the connector, or to the API. We need to add units here, so we'll add units. And we'll say equals. This is just the one way to do it, units. So okay, now we've got the new config and we got the units, so let's go back, we'll just publish deploy. And we'll see what it looks like now. Right, so we got units now, right? It's cool. We'll see how it works. We have the 3 that we just added, and then we'll use metric instead. And that will connect. We didn't add any fields yet, so this will be the same. We didn't change anything here. We'll create another report. And when we add it this time, we'll see that it's not going to be 300 Kelvin anymore. It's going to be whatever that is in Celsius, like high 20s or something. Let's see. All right, so now we have, 28 to like 37. So now we're actually working in metric units now, which is great, right? So we did that, added that, exposed that feature for users now with connectivity. And let's go back and do one more thing, which is let's add rain to this thing. So again, I'm going to go back to my cheat sheet down here. We need to add a new field, right? So we need to add a new rain amount field. We're going to add it to the schema. So here's our schema. And add a new field here. And this is, mainly the main thing here is we have a name for it, which is like kind of the ID. And some label for the user. And then a couple things about the field, like is it a number, things like that, right? And there's more options you can actually configure here, but for simplicity, let's just say it's a metric and it's called rain amount. Right? So we want to save that. And then now we actually need to, if someone requests a field, we need to send the data back for this particular field. So we want to do one more thing, which is go down here. I'll take this from down here. And we're going to add one more thing, which is, in the case statements, we're going to look for if there's a rain amount request, basically, that's what it's doing. We're going to push the data.rain property value onto the array. And if it doesn't exist, we'll just make it 0. That probably isn't there, which means there's no rain that day. So now the data object will include this value, so let's test for it. So let's go back once more, deploy. It's going to bring us back into Data Studio again. Creating a lot of data sources today, it's okay. seen this before. We're going to do, let's do Fahrenheit, let's do imperial this time. We're going to connect. Now we should see a new field here called rain amount. And, or rain. And there it is. So the second field, now it's available for users to use. We'll create another report with this. And so in this case, we'll do another time series, why not? And so it should be Fahrenheit 1, the max temp, which it is now. We're in the 75 to 80s range. And let's add another rain metric to this option here. And now we're going to see another line show up, and that's the rain over time. If we get rid of max temp, we'll actually see what it looks like for the next 16 days. So some rain coming, but we're expecting some rain. Not a lot, there's some. Cool. So that was basically, I don't know how long it took, but it shows you at some level kind of how the workflow is, what are the things you need to provide, and how kind of simple, most of the code is really just around parsing some JavaScript and maybe making that transition from the API to Data Studio with what requirements it has. So the only few things I want to touch on was, what happens after you build a connector? Like, what do you do with this thing? Why do what's the point after the fact, I guess? There's a few things you can do. One is that deep link is really important. It allows you to share that with other people. So you can share that internally, externally. So anybody can use that connector once you've built it. Just provide that link to them. And that was kind of a design decision we made. You can also build a template report. So help people understand how to use the connector and like what's possible with this particular connector and the data that I can query. For example, I have a report here that was built using the Google Fit connector that someone had built. And so this is someone's like Google Fit account. They've got like a public report, and it's pulling data in from this Google Fit connector. And you can see like today, this person had 60 minutes of activity had. And it's just updating. Every time I look at this report, it's updating. And that's using the Google Fit connector that someone built, which is really cool. And then you can publish your connector. So we do have opportunities, like if you want to build a connector and publish it for other people to use, you can either publish it in our gallery, or you can open source it on GitHub, and that's another option too. And if you open source it, like my team will manage the deployment, so you don't have to worry about support or things like that. If you're a partner connector, that means you're basically supporting the connector in your team. That's kind of the main difference there. CodeLab, if you guys are interested in building one, there's actually CodeLab I think you should check out. I'll provide the links later on, but that's actually 30 minutes you can get a connector from end to end working. It's pretty cool. And then, has anybody built a connector before? Has anybody built it before? Okay, no. Okay. So some stuff you may right now be interested in, but there is some stuff coming down in the pipe. I think if you get into it, you'll be like, just for your own knowledge, you'll be like, why don't they have this, or what's missing? We are adding some things, so if you come across some features that are missing, we probably know about it already, and we're probably working on it. But in the short term, we're going to add some new auth types. So connectors support OAuth and OAuth 1 and 2. But there's some people have been asking for username and password as an authentication method and tokens, so we're going to add that. We're going to do a much better job in improving error messaging. If you build a connector and things are not working, you're probably going to be scratching your head of what's going on. We know that's a problem, and we're adding a lot more functionality around that. And then in Socket, we were in app scripts, right? Doing a lot of things in app scripts. If you've ever used app scripts before, there's actually like services that help you interact with APIs and build things out. We have one of those coming for Data Studio connectors, so that you're not manipulating like objects, you're actually just using a helper library to get that built. So it makes it much easier. And then we know that people want to do more deep linking into the product. So you can link right into use the connector, but what if you want to pre-configure those fields? That's coming soon. We've had a lot of people request that, especially if you're coming from another product and you want to just put them into a specific configuration. It makes a lot of sense. And then ultimately, we know that people want to do more with the UIs. Like we have some text input and single select drop downs and stuff, but we know people want to do more advanced UIs in the configuration. So we're working on enabling HTML kind of and CSS native UIs that you can build, so more customization around that. And most of these you'll probably be thinking of if you start building a connector, you'll be like, why don't they have this? But we're working on it. The last thing is, I talked about connecting the data, but there's also visualization, right? So one thing we just recently launched was the ability for you to build your own visualizations in Data Studio. So just the way you can extend connectors, we can actually extend visualizations and build your own. We recognize there's like a ton of visualization libraries out there. There's a lot of people that want to build their own custom viz. So we've enabled that, and you guys can use that if you want to. I can just show you a quick example. This is a report using, I think, Google Analytics data, and it's being rendered using D3, visualization library. So let me just back up. And so this is D3, and you can zoom in and interact with it, things like that. Which is really cool because it's using live data and it's D3 rendering, so it's awesome. So this is really cool. I think you'll be able to do a lot of stuff with this. It's a lot of different designs with it, so it's going to be interesting to see what people build. And then lastly, there's just some resources for you guys. I think I'd recommend just going and check it out. Like I said, the barrier to entry is very low. It's a free product. And datastudio.google.com, you can play around with it. And if you're interested in building things, then developers.google.com/datastudio is the main point of entry to start with this. And check it out, build something very quick, play around with it. It's actually quite fun to build a connector and see it working. It's actually always interesting to see people when they see data coming in live. It's always a big thing. It's awesome. So, anyways, thank you guys very much for your time today. Wi-Fi held up, was great, so thank you very much.